On a fateful Thursday in 1929, the stock market plunged by a gut-wrenching 25% of its value in a single horrifying day. Millions woke up believing they were millionaires, only to go to bed utterly, irrevocably bankrupt. Fortunes simply evaporated in hours. Suddenly, 25% of the American population found themselves unemployed, 1 in every 4 workers, with absolutely no income. Bread lines, once a distant concept, stretched for city blocks. Middle-class families found themselves eating in charity kitchens. Banks slammed their doors shut every single day. People's life savings just disappeared without a shred of warning. Children were tragically abandoned, their parents unable to provide even the most basic sustenance. The elderly perished from hunger on the streets. This economic plague began in the U.S., then quickly infected the entire world within months. No nation managed to escape its grim reach. It dragged on for a full decade, a horrifying era of misery, widespread despair, and unprecedented social collapse. This very crisis, a shadow over the globe, inadvertently created Hitler, profoundly altered the course of World War II. It then proceeded to redesign the very fabric of capitalism, forever changing how we understand our economy. And here's the kicker. The warning signs were all flashing bright red. Yet almost no one wanted to see them, until it was far, far too late. The Great Depression, stretching from 1929 to 1939, stands as the worst economic crisis in modern history. It wasn't just a downturn, it was an economic apocalypse that gripped the entire world. Unemployment skyrocketed to an unimaginable 25% in the United States alone. The gross domestic product, GDP, in many nations plummeted by a staggering 50% or more. Thousands upon thousands of banks collapsed, taking life savings with them into the void. This was no ordinary recession. Its sheer scale and duration set it apart from previous crises. Other recessions were often localized or relatively short-lived. The Depression was global and relentless. It created a ripple effect, destabilizing societies and governments across every continent. The crisis deeply impacted everyday life, eroding trust in institutions and the very system itself. It taught humanity a brutal lesson about economic fragility and the consequences of unchecked greed. Before the crash, America was basking in the roaring 20s, an era of seemingly endless prosperity. This decade was characterized by rampant consumerism, jazz music, and a pervasive sense of optimism. Credit was readily available, encouraging people to buy cars, radios, and household appliances on installment plans. Everyone felt rich, or at least believed they could be, thanks to a booming stock market. Fortunes were made, often on paper, as stock prices seemed to only climb higher and higher. There was a palpable illusion of permanent wealth, a collective delusion that defied economic reality. The stock market became a playground for speculation, attracting everyone from tycoons to barbers. People genuinely believed they had discovered a cheat code for perpetual prosperity. It was a dizzying party, fueled by easy money and unbridled confidence, blissfully unaware of the hangover. This artificial boom, this carefree dance, was merely the prelude to an unprecedented, devastating collapse. The day it all started was Black Thursday, October 24, 1929, a date etched in financial infamy. Panic erupted on the New York Stock Exchange as investors frantically tried to sell their shares. The ticker tape machines, usually a beacon of progress, couldn't keep up with the sheer volume. Stories of distraught investors, utterly ruined, circulated rapidly, some even jumping from buildings. In a single day, an astonishing 16 million shares were traded, dumped in a frenzy of total despair. Wealth accumulated over years vanished in minutes, turning paper fortunes into mere dust. The market lost billions, a sum almost incomprehensible at the time, equivalent to today's trillions. It was a stark, brutal awakening from the dream of endless prosperity that defined the 1920s. Black Thursday wasn't the end, but it was the dramatic, terrifying curtain raiser to a decade of suffering. The world watched in horror as the pillars of American capitalism seemed to crumble before their eyes. The market collapse wasn't a sudden act of God. It was a consequence of deep-seated economic flaws. Uncontrolled speculation was rampant, with ordinary citizens gambling their savings on volatile stocks. Many bought shares on margin, meaning they borrowed money, sometimes 90% of the price, to invest. This amplified gains but meant tiny drops could wipe out entire investments and leave debt. Industrial overproduction was another culprit. Factories made more goods than people could afford. Wealth inequality was extreme, with a vast majority of the nation's riches concentrated at the top. This meant too few people had enough disposable income to buy the products being churned out. The financial system was essentially a giant, unstable house of cards, built on shaky foundations. There was a massive economic bubble, inflated by false confidence and reckless behavior. Ultimately, this bubble was destined to burst, and when it did, the reverberations were catastrophic. It was less a mystery, more a predictable outcome of fundamental economic mismanagement and hubris. The tremors from Wall Street rapidly became a global earthquake, sparing virtually no nation. The U.S., being a major creditor and trading partner, exported its economic woes worldwide. Countries tied to the gold standard faced severe constraints, unable to devalue their currency to stimulate growth. As American banks called back loans, Europe's fragile post-WWI economies crumbled instantly. International trade collapsed dramatically as nations imposed protectionist tariffs, creating a vicious cycle. Each country tried to save itself, but these policies only served to choke global commerce further. Raw material suppliers in Asia and Latin America saw demand and prices for their goods plummet. Farmers globally suffered as commodity prices hit rock bottom, destroying livelihoods overnight. The intertwined global financial system proved to be an Achilles heel, spreading contagion rapidly. It was a brutal lesson in economic interdependence, showing that no country truly operates in isolation. This was the moment the world learned that a sneeze in New York could give the entire planet pneumonia. Life during the Depression was a stark, desperate struggle for survival for millions. Across America, Hoovervilles sprang up, shanty towns for the homeless, mocking President Hoover's inaction. These makeshift communities, built from scraps, became grim symbols of utter destitution. Long, silent bread lines became a common sight, as hungry people waited for meager charity meals. Farmers, already struggling, lost their lands to foreclosures, their futures blown away. The infamous Dust Bowl, a series of severe dust storms, ravaged farmlands in the American plains. This environmental disaster forced countless families to abandon their homes and migrate west, searching for work. One iconic image, Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother, captured the raw anguish of the era. It depicted a weary mother, Florence Owens Thompson, with her children, embodying resilience amidst despair. These were not just statistics. These were real families, their lives shattered, their dignity tested daily. The Depression was a deeply personal catastrophe, impacting every aspect of daily existence for a generation. Bank failures were a terrifying systemic feature of the Great Depression, not isolated incidents. The root cause was a phenomenon known as a bank run, fueled by panic and lack of trust. When people feared a bank might fail, they rushed to withdraw all their deposits simultaneously. Banks only keep a fraction of deposits on hand. The rest is invested or loaned out. Without enough cash to meet demand, even healthy banks were forced to close their doors. Between 1930 and 1933, over 9,000 banks collapsed across the United States. People's life savings, painstakingly accumulated over decades, simply vanished into thin air. This was devastating because, at the time, there was no federal deposit insurance to protect account holders. If your bank failed, your money was gone, plain and simple, with no recourse. The absence of this safety net created a cycle of fear and further bank runs, deepening the crisis. It shattered public confidence in the entire financial system, a wound that took years to heal. President Herbert Hoover's initial response to the crisis was largely ineffective, even counterproductive. Believing in limited government intervention, he advocated for voluntary cooperation and self-reliance. His administration often dismissed the severity of the crisis, hoping market forces would self-correct. Some policies enacted actually made things worse, like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This act dramatically raised import duties, sparking retaliatory tariffs from other countries. It strangled international trade, further deepening the global economic downturn and isolating the U.S. Hoover's attempts to balance the budget by increasing taxes and cutting government spending were disastrous. These austerity measures reduced consumer demand and investment when the economy needed stimulus. His inaction and misguided policies led to widespread public disillusionment and anger. The failure of the government to provide direct relief or intervention only prolonged the suffering. The initial response was a masterclass in how not to handle a full-blown economic catastrophe. Franklin D. Roosevelt's election in 1932 ushered in a radically different approach, the New Deal. This ambitious series of programs aimed at relief, recovery, and reform for the nation. The government intervened massively, creating public works programs to put millions back to work. Projects like the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, and the Public Works Administration, PWA, built infrastructure. Banking regulation was dramatically strengthened with the creation of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. The FDIC guaranteed bank deposits, restoring public trust and preventing further bank runs. Social Security was established, creating a safety net for the elderly, unemployed, and disabled. This represented a fundamental shift, with the government taking on a new, active role in economic welfare. There's a debate about whether the New Deal alone ended the Depression, or if WW stimulus was the true cure. Regardless, it provided crucial relief, restored hope, and reshaped the American economic landscape forever. Roosevelt's bold leadership fundamentally changed the relationship between citizens and their government. The economic devastation of the Great Depression had profound and terrifying global political consequences. Widespread misery and desperation provided fertile ground for extremist ideologies to flourish. In Germany, the economic collapse directly fueled the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Hitler promised to restore order, create jobs, and make Germany strong again, preying on public despair. The Depression also contributed to the rise of authoritarian regimes in other parts of Europe and Asia. It exposed the vulnerabilities of democratic systems struggling to cope with unprecedented crises. The resulting instability, militarism, and aggressive expansionist policies set the stage for World War II. The Great Depression, therefore, is an indirect but powerful cause of the deadliest conflict in human history. Its legacy serves as a stark warning. Economic collapse can unravel societies and usher in unimaginable horrors. The lessons from this era about regulation, social safety nets, and global cooperation remain crucially relevant today. We must always be vigilant, for the echoes of past mistakes often whisper warnings from history's darkest chapters. The Great Depression was more than just an economic downturn. It was a profound human tragedy that reshaped the 20th century. It exposed the fragility of prosperity, the dangers of unchecked speculation, and the dire consequences of government inaction. From the bustling streets of Wall Street to the desolate Dust Bowl, its impact touched every corner of society, leaving an indelible mark on a generation. Yet, out of that despair came innovation, reform, and a new understanding of the government's role in protecting its citizens. The world learned through immense suffering that economies are deeply interconnected and that a crisis anywhere can quickly become a crisis everywhere. We saw the true cost of extremism born from desperation and the immense power of collective action to rebuild. The echoes of 1929 still resonate today, reminding us that vigilance, empathy, and responsible governance are not luxuries, but necessities. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most pivotal and painful periods. What surprised you most about the Great Depression's impact, and do you think we've truly learned its lessons? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, please hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history, and we'll see you in the next video.